I want to show you a clip from a conversation between Erick and Victor Davis Hanson. They're talking about Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance, and then also Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, where all of that, where everything's headed on the right. Both of them, both Victor Davis Hanson and Erick Metaxas, make some very good points in this clip, but there are a few spots where I think that they're missing something, or where I have a take based on what I know that's different than what they're saying, basically. So I'm going to play this in chunks. I'm going to stop along the way. Let's pull it up, and we'll play the first 2.5 minutes or so of this clip. Okay, let's go for it. Here we go. And play.
Well, what's of course also unforeseen is what some are calling the woke right. I don't know if you ever comment on Tucker opening the door to Nick Fuentes and his gang, or Candace Owens. It's a bizarre phenomenon that I still don't know how we can call it the right, but the people that were formerly on the right seem to have opened the door to these things, and have now openly stood against the president and Tucker against the Republican Party. I mean, when you talk about things that we couldn't have predicted a year ago, I still don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I don't either. Tucker Carlson, I was on his show for, I think, 8 years every Monday night. He used to give pretty well-reasoned arguments to why we should be afraid of the Islamic takeover of Europe, for example, or radical Islam within the United States. And he supported Israel. Megyn Kelly a year ago, she gave a very well thought out attack on radical Islam. Candace Owens was a different case altogether. And I think she was always unstable. And whether it was Macron's wife being a man or the Mossad, I think she's discredited and she's not part of the party. But what we're getting at some point, I guess what I'm saying is that I like J.D. Vance, but when J.D. Vance says Israel can't bomb its way out to victory, or he says that he's really found moderates among the Iranian delegation and it might usher in a new Middle East, or he says things to that nature, it gives Tucker and those other people confidence to keep going, is what I'm saying. Not that he is himself, he's not an anti-Semite. J.D. Vance is not an anti-Semite. He's a very loyal person to Trump, but he's getting battered. The Wall Street Journal attacks him almost every week. And at some point, he's going to have to come out, I think, and reaffirm his support for the Rubio, Trump, MAGA agenda as it pertains to Israel, Jews, etc. Just because of these people really do feel that he is their advocate.
Okay, let's pause it there. I just want to push back on something that Victor Davis Hanson said towards the beginning of this, where he described Tucker Carlson as having supported Israel back in his Fox days. And I don't think that's accurate. Now, it's true that Tucker did not attack Israel when he was on Fox, but he actually avoided Israel completely. He did not defend Israel at all. In fact, it was so conspicuous. I remember I had a good friend of mine. I used to watch Tucker every day, and I loved it. I loved his opening monologues. I thought his show was great. And I have a close friend. I think I mentioned this in one video a little while ago. I have a close friend who also watched Tucker regularly and said to me that he thinks Tucker's anti-Israel. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've never heard him say anything anti-Israel. And he said, yeah, that's exactly it. He never, ever talks about Israel. Even if Israel is in the headlines, even if it's big news, he'll avoid the topic. And then right after he left Fox, he turned, he started with all the anti-Israel stuff and going down that path. But on Fox, it's true that on Fox he would warn about the Islamic takeover of Europe, of radical Islam in the West, But again, all of the Iran sympathizing and casting Israel and somewhat Jews as well, but Israel being this kind of real enemy from within, that all started after he after he left Fox. All right, let's play some more of this.
Well, that's the thing. Kimberly Strassel in the Wall Street Journal hit J.D. Vance very hard. And I thought, wow, he has to respond to this. But it's a funny thing because we're living in a world now where if you don't respond to certain things, I mean, Megyn Kelly allowing the vicious attacks to Erica Kirk to go on and on and on. We're living in very strange times right now, and it seems like J.D. Vance has. I don't know where he stands on these things, but it is curious that you have to do. I mean, you and I will remember Bill Clinton's famous Sister Soldier moment in 1992, where he slaps down the quote unquote raptivist. I mean, the only we remember Sister Soldier is because of this moment. But it is interesting. Buckley did the same thing in the 60s with the John Birch Society, where you simply say, there's a line here. We have to reject people on the other side of the line. We have to bring it up. We have to talk about it. And that's something that J.D. Vance hasn't done. And I find it at least curious, if not confusing.
Yeah.
Okay. There's this assumption, actually, let's watch, I guess we should watch Victor Davis Hanson's reaction first, right? But, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me just say that what Erick is saying here is he's assuming that if J.D. Vance did a William F. Buckley moment, saying the John Birch Society is out, or what Bill Clinton said about Sister Soldier, who was part of the Democrat coalition, and he basically said, we have red lines. Erick is assuming that this would work for Vance the way it worked for Buckley or for Clinton. And I'm not sure it would. And the reason I say that is the current climate, the current political climate. The reason that cancel culture backlash is so powerful on the right is because an entire generation of younger conservatives watched the left policing language and ideas. And the climate right now on the right is that if you draw red lines and you say this person is out, or you're not allowed to say that, it looks like establishment behavior. And it reads as exactly the thing that they've been taught to resent. Saying the forbidden thing has become cool. Enforcing boundaries is a sign that you've sold out. So, if they're right, well, let's watch a little bit about what Victor Davis Hanson says, and then we'll comment some more.
I think his strategy, and this is just speculation, is he understands that 40% of the electorate are white working class voters without college degrees, and they are 68% MAGA voters, and they've made the difference. They have abandoned the Democratic Party, and his future, both from his own background and his own political positions, he wants to keep that margin because he will not do as well with minorities as other Republicans might do. And so I think he keeps saying and he has legitimate points of argument. He says, they were the losers of globalization. They can't afford homes. They've been suffering from imported drugs, open borders, all of that. And they're very patriotic, and they were discriminated by DEI and all that. But at some point, that's not going to get you elected. And I'm just talking now in crass political terms. So he's going to lose a lot of people, and they're not just crazy never Trumpers. They're people who like him, that are conservative, that were all in on him being the next nominee. But they're very, very upset because I've talked to hundreds of them, and they feel that he didn't come out strongly against Nick Fuentes, as you point out. He did not come out against Tucker, and he said things himself that could be interpreted that he detests Netanyahu, he doesn't like Israel, and he's suspicious of why they have supports. And when he says things like he's still troubled by the Charlie Kirk thing or the Mossad, or there's some things we'll never know about Epstein. All of that reinforces that sense that he is too close to people that are unstable.
Okay, so if Victor Davis Hanson is right that older conservatives want Vance to publicly break with Tucker Carlson, okay, and you could be right about that. It could be that that's what older conservatives want. I think he's actually right. I think older conservatives kind of want that, the red lines to be drawn and someone to stand up and say, and set things right. And if he's right about this, if Victor Davis Hanson's right about this assessment, then J.D. Vance is in a real bind. Because if Vance were to do something like that, and a big chunk of the younger populist base would see him as caving to the establishment and lacking integrity from their perspective. But if he doesn't do it, and guys like Victor Davis Hanson keep saying that it's a problem that he's staying silent and they don't trust him because of that, there's no clean Buckley move available to J.D. Vance here, because the political culture that made Buckley's move work doesn't exist anymore. That's what I think is going on here. So that said, I don't think this is only a calculation for Vance. I think there's a real chance that he actually might agree with a good chunk of what the Tucker wing on Israel says. That's what I find disturbing. Meaning, Victor Davis Hanson is framing it as kind of like, oh, this is the political calculation. But what if J.D. Vance actually agrees with them? Look at his own recent statements surrounding the MOU criticism, both what he said on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I made a video about, and what he said at the press conference right after the MOU was signed. At that press conference, remember, he claimed that Israeli cabinet ministers were personally attacking Trump. Now, there's no record of that happening. Zero. It was fabricated. It was a straw man saying, "Oh, they shouldn't. They're personally attacking Trump, and that's bad." But they weren't. They were Israelis. You'd never hear an Israeli cabinet minister attacking Trump. There's tremendous gratitude to Trump and Israel, even as there's sometimes frustration with moves that he makes. But there was also, Israeli cabinet ministers' statements are on public record, and I'm not the only one. People searched. So that's an example where J.D. Vance was actually, it indicated to me that he might actually agree with these guys. Because that type of move by J.D. Vance, when he made that claim, it kind of lines up with this conspiratorial framing that's coming out of the Tucker world. So I'm not sure that it's just a kind of crass political calculation for Vance. So Victor Davis Hanson's read that this is pure electoral math, protect the 40% white working class MAGA bloc, because you don't do so great with minorities, you need that voters, and that's true. And this is why I don't think J.D. Vance can win. But I don't think it's the whole story. I think Vance might actually be sympathetic to some of the toxic stuff on the right. And that's what's most worrying to me. Let's go a little further. We'll play another couple minutes of this.
Well, I just, at this point, what fascinates me, I think what Tucker has done is absolutely despicable. He has really hurt Turning Point. If he was ever any friend to Charlie Kirk, he would do all he could to help Turning Point. He really has hurt Turning Point, put them in a difficult position. He certainly hurt the Heritage Foundation. He's playing some game where he doesn't seem to care about these things. And now, of course, he has publicly turned against the Republican Party. I mean, before that, he turned against Trump. And, at some point, you just wonder who he's speaking to. I have no idea who Candace Owens is speaking to, but we know in our lifetime, the National Enquirer could always make money. There are always people out there who will believe that Macron is married to a woman and will take that seriously. Man. I mean, there's just a level of madness. But I guess to me, the viciousness that Nick Fuentes has expressed on any number of topics, extraordinary, vile viciousness, and he always despised and was jealous of Charlie Kirk. If there ever were a time to say this guy is not of our tribe, and anybody you have to choose. You follow Charlie Kirk, or do you follow Nick Fuentes, or do you follow Charlie Kirk, or do you follow Candace Owens? We need leaders who are willing to do that. Trump is the only one who has been willing to do that, it seems to me. But we need more voices like that. And I think that Megyn Kelly in that same group, they've just done themselves effectively fatal damage, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the part of the clip that really hit me pretty hard, because it brought back, this was a big topic with Charlie, both publicly and in our chats. This question of boundaries and red lines and who's in and who's out, and trying to keep the coalition together while also keeping the bad actors out. With Fuentes, Charlie drew that line. He was out with Candace. Charlie drew that line very famously. He stopped having her turning point, and she was out because she crossed certain lines. Now, Tucker was the one that Charlie was still on board with, but he was struggling with. And this doesn't get talked about enough because people don't know. People don't know what was happening behind the scenes. But, Charlie was, after the backlash, when Tucker gave this very toxic anti-Israel, even anti-Semitic speech in last July, about a year ago, and then there was all this backlash from the Jewish community, the pro-Israel community, and people, never mind the fact that there were also pro-Israel speakers at that conference that no one remembers that. That didn't make the news. That's a problem on our side, that we only notice the bad stuff. In any event, when all that backlash was going on, Charlie was very much struggling with, what's going to happen next with his relationship with Tucker, having him at TPUSA events. And then I'll tell you honestly, what happened was someone in the pro-Israel community attacked Charlie for platforming Tucker, like so viciously, that Charlie, being the type of person he was, he didn't like to be pushed around. So that's when he went ahead and booked Tucker for the next conference. But it was something he struggled with. I don't know exactly what would have happened if Charlie was still alive and Tucker had done everything he's done since, because Tucker has gone more and more extreme and more conspiratorial and more anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. So I'll say this confidently, though. I don't believe, and that's the thing. I don't think that Tucker would have gone as far as he's gone if Charlie were still alive. And this brings up, so in this vein, I'll bring up a detail that is very interesting. That Charlie appeared on Tucker Carlson's show. Tucker interviewed Charlie not long before he was killed. You can go back and watch the interview. And it's really interesting because it's like the only interview over the course of months that Tucker did. Pretty much it's the only interview where the topic of Israel did not come up at all. And they talked about a lot of different topics. Didn't mention Israel even once in the interview. And it's not like Israel is not relevant. I mean, Charlie talked about Israel all the time. Tucker, of course, talked about Israel all the time. The topic did not come up. And it wasn't an accident. It was an agreement between them that the topic would not get touched in the interview. Charlie knew exactly where Tucker stood, and he didn't want to mix it up. He didn't want to get into it with him, and he made a deliberate choice not to let that conversation happen. So what I'm saying here is that Charlie was managing the situation. This was something he thought about a lot, and he actively thought about a lot. I mean, he actively worked on the whole question of where are the lines. That doesn't mean I always agreed with where he drew them. I'm just saying this was the type of leadership that Erick is talking about, makes me think about Charlie. That's all. That's my point. Let's do one more clip of this. We'll pick it up around here.
Now I'm unaware of that. Did you?
Yes,
can you repeat
he was
that?
talking
Because I
yes.
can hardly believe what you just said.
Let me go back.
We're going to have Tucker's case. He tries to identify with the heritage people, or he tries to identify with J.D. Vance, and then he puts them in a position where he wants to be extreme, and then he wants to force them to make a choice. And if they hesitate, then he takes that as an endorsement and gets more emboldened. So at some point, people are going to have to see that he's playing them. And that's, I don't know for the algorithms or the clicks or the bots or whatever it is, but they need to come out and say, this administration is a firm supporter of Israel. This administration does not believe in a conspiracy of Jews in the shadows that are running things. This administration is firmly pro-capitalism, and it abhors what's going on with the Democratic Socialists. I only say that because Tucker has talked very effusively of Graham Plattner and the socialist agenda.
Now, I'm unaware of that. Did you?
Yeah,
can you repeat
he was
that?
talking
Because I can hardly believe what you just said.
Yeah, he said he was going to have him on his show. He'd like to interview him. And so it's part of this new Republican, new right. There was very good things that people like Orrin Cass and people did that called for a redirection of attention to closing the border and helping the white working class that was forgotten by globalization. But
here, hold on. Let me just comment here. Erick being surprised about Tucker's affinity for Graham Plattner surprised me, because it shouldn't be surprising at all. Tucker isn't really a conservative. He's a populist and a nationalist, and a lot of his actual instincts, some populist nationalists are also conservatives, but I don't think Tucker's a conservative. I don't think he's on the right. A lot of his instincts are standard issue leftist attitudes, suspicion of capital, suspicion of Israel. These are standard left-wing positions. And in many ways, Tucker, I think, leans left. So wanting to sit down with democratic socialists like Plattner isn't a departure for Tucker. It's actually consistent with who he is. The only thing surprising is that people still consider him part of the right. Anyway, let's finish up this clip.
The next step beyond that is sort of a quasi-socialism, and you tie that in with the Jews running Wall Street and the financiers and the disloyal big techies and all of that stuff. So he's got to, I think he's going to have to come out and just say, I want to reiterate my support for the Donald Trump agenda, both economically, culturally, socially, politically, and in foreign affairs. And I do think his forte is domestic affairs. He's 42 years old. I don't think.
You're talking about J.D. Vance now.
Yeah, yes. I wouldn't have put him in that spot. Maybe let me phrase it that way. I wouldn't have put him in that spot of being a chief negotiator over the Iran deal when you have somebody like Rubio and others in the State Department. Because what he said about trusting or hoping that he's found moderates among the Iranian delegation, that's just a complete amnesia of the last 47 years of both Democrats and Republicans who've dealt with that regime. There is no moderate group. If they're a moderate group, they're going to be shot in Iran. It's like saying there's a moderate Nazi group or there's a moderate group around Stalin. It doesn't exist.
Okay. Look, I actually think the Iran comment from Vance saying that, they're reasonable people, moderates in the negotiating team, it brings us back to the beginning, to the beginning of this. The moderates in Iran idea is the same instinct as Tucker becoming an apologist for political Islam. And this is why I say that J.D. Vance might actually have an affinity for the whole Tucker wing and their whole way of thinking. Because, again, one of the most disturbing aspects of Tucker and Candace and others there, and Megan is now joined in, is they've become apologists for political Islam. And so I see a through line here where they're just not seeing clearly about the civilizational battle that we're in. That you assume that the ideology, this I mean, the Iranian regime ideology is, to look at it and say that there's a reasonable wing that you can do business with is very delusional. When Tucker spoke at a conference in Riyadh not long ago, I've mentioned this a few times, and he said from the stage, and this was, I think, the exact quote, "As a Christian, I feel totally comfortable here in the seat of Islam in Saudi Arabia." Now, Saudi Arabia is one of the worst persecutors of Christians on the planet. There's about 2 million Christians in Saudi Arabia, and they are among the most persecuted Christians in the world. I'm not going to go through the whole litany of ways they're persecuted, but according to Open Doors International, which is the Christian NGO that tracks persecution of Christians around the world, Saudi Arabia is one of the worst places in the world for Christians. And Tucker sat there on stage and said, "I feel totally comfortable here." He was being an apologist for the Saudi Arabian regime on that issue of Christianity. So when J.D. Vance, now I think Tucker is more devious. I don't think Vance is a devious person. But looking at these regimes and seeing moderation where there isn't any, that's what's disturbing here. Anyway, that's the clip I wanted to share with you. Victor Davis Hanson, Erick Metaxas, they get a lot right, but I think they're missing, again, just to review, they're missing how toxic red line drawing on the right has become. I don't think they realize how toxic it is. Anything that even smells like canceling certain parts or making rules is just absolutely rejected. And I think they're also underestimating how much Charlie Kirk was actually holding the coalition together before he died. Or maybe they're not touching on that topic, but it's something I think about a lot. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments of this video. I'm interested, and I do read as many of the comments as I can. I make time every day to read comments on the videos. And thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing. And please make sure that you're also subscribed on Israel 365 News. We're putting up a lot of content there every day as well. All right, God bless.